Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Samso. It's been a while since we've had an episode here, as we've been working on getting more value onto the Samso platform. The addition that we've had in 2025 is a new product called Samso News, and you're going to be hearing a lot more coming out from Samso in regards to Samso News. We've had recently been publishing articles since probably the beginning of May. So head on to our website and check out Samso News. For those who have not been subscribing to Coffee with Samso, please click that bell. Don't miss out on the news that we're going to be pushing out in earnest as we move forward. Today we have the return of our favorite ASX explorer, Miramar Resources. It has a market cap just under 3 million. So we're going to get Allan Kelly to come and tell us what's happening on Miramar. For those who've been following us lately, we've had a catchphrase, seek the research. And today we're trying to find that research and give that underlying valuation of, or underlying value of Miramar as a potential investment. So as usual, grab your favorite beverage and sit back and enjoy the next episode of Coffee with Samso. Thank you. Welcome to another Coffee with Samso. Today, as I said, we're here with Allan Kelly from Miramar Resources. Allan, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. Been a while.
Yes. Look, let's recap on where Miramar is today, July 2025.
Yep. Well, it's been a pretty tough couple of years for junior explorers the last couple of years, and everyone's been changing commodities like changing their socks, but seen that gold price take off in the last 6 months or so, and fortunately we've got a great project that we've had since day one, which is our Gidji project, which is just 15 km north of Kalgoorlie, and that's where the focus is at the moment. So we've got a couple of things going on there. We've just finished the air core program, which you can talk a bit more about in a minute, and we're waiting on results from that. We've just also finished a SAM survey, a sub-audio magnetic survey, and we're just about to kick off an RC drilling program this weekend out there as well.
Just to so that everyone understands, I mean, us geotechnical people love to use terminologies. The SAM survey, I mean, what can you explain to what you're trying to delineate with that? That method?
Yeah, so SAM stands for sub-audio magnetics, and basically what it is, it's a combination of a magnetic survey and an EM survey, an electromagnetic survey. And the idea is that when you do like a normal magnetic survey, you run a magnetometer across the ground and you're measuring stuff that's produced by the Earth's magnetic field, okay? So, you get structures and things like that you can use for targeting drill holes. But what you do with SAM is you actually create a magnetic field of your own in a particular direction. So year 12 physics, if you have a current in a loop, it creates a magnetic field. So basically what you do is you lay out either a loop or a couple of wires, and you create a current between those wires, and then that creates a magnetic field. And you can orient that field in the direction that you want to look. And so the idea is if you think you've got structures running in a particular direction and you want to see those structures rather than those structures, you can create a magnetic field that highlights those structures preferentially by using SAM. Okay? So in our case, what we're trying to do is that we've got the geology at Gidji running in a particular direction, but we think the most likely orientation of the structures that are going to be mineralised in the bedrock are offset to that. So what we want to do is we set up the SAM survey to look preferentially for that orientation. Okay, so you set out these wires, and then these days they used to use a magnetometer on the ground and walk, but now they use a drone. So they set out the loop or the wires, and then they fly the drone back and forth. And then the level of detail of the data is quite amazing. And what's really important for us for is that because we've got this paleochannel that runs across the project, it obscures a lot of the features that you might see normally. So that's why we use air core drilling, and now we're using SAM to try and see through that paleochannel to look at the basement structures underneath that paleochannel. And this is the thing that, you know, SAM's been around about, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years. We used it at Dolerite at Andy Well. There's some really good surveys that have been done on salt lakes as well, where it sees through the salt lake and can pick up the structures. But the key is that you're looking for structures in a preferential orientation, and that's what SAM's really good for. So that survey's been finished. We're now waiting on the data, and then we'll put that together with our air core drilling data, and then work out if we can see where these potentially mineralised bedrock structures are, and then that'll give us a much better opportunity to test them with deeper drilling rather than just sort of going out blind, if you get what I mean.
So one of the issues for you guys when you were working at Gidji before needing to move to a new commodity because the market deemed that you'd had to, was the paleochannel not being able to go through it, right? And so how deep is this paleochannel we're talking about?
So the Gidji Paleochannel runs at right angles across the geology, and it sort of averages about 50 metres deep. So it's not that deep in terms of vertical depth and if you find a deposit underneath it. But the problem is more of a technical one in that because the channel is like a river channel, right? And so it's got lots of clay and then it's got sort of lots of loose running sands in it. It makes it a bit difficult for RC drilling. When you try and drill holes through the paleochannel with an RC rig, because that's got a lot of air and a lot of pressure, it tends to loosen up that sand and you end up with big cavities and things. So when you're drilling with an RC rig, you get sort of one shot at it to get through and into the basement. And if you don't get through into the basement with that first go, then you can start to have all sorts of problems. And when we've drilled with RC there previously, you know, we've had about a 40% failure rate of the RC holes. Not because we didn't find what we're looking for, because the hole didn't actually get to the target depth. And that happened to us, I think last year was the last time we drilled a hole there, was at Blackfriars. So that's really frustrating. Air core, because it uses less air, and because the blade or the bit is actually a sort of a cutting blade rather than a smashing bit like a hammer bit, it tends to get through much better. And so you just drill vertical holes and you can get down to the basement and get into that bedrock pretty well with air core. I don't think we've ever had an air core hole fail. So that's the frustrating bit for us. So we're trying to use everything we can to narrow the targets down so that when we go back with RC or diamond, that we've got a much clearer target, and that's what, you know, the SAM's for. But also, you know, people sort of ask, well, why do we keep doing air core drilling? Why do you keep doing more air core drilling? And this is the other issue with the paleochannel. So in a typical regolith profile in the goldfields, you know, you have your fresh rock at the base, and your mineralisation might only be a few metres wide. If you take, say, Paddington, which is the thing that we're really sort of looking for at Gidji, the Paddington deposit is hosted in a dolerite, a differentiated dolerite, the Paddington dolerite. Now that's only 30 metres wide, and it's basically got not much for halo either side of it. But when that deposit has been weathered, so the top bit, the bit that we call the supergene bit, it creates a plume or a sort of a mushroom above that dolerite, and that mushroom can be sort of 100 or 200 metres wide. So that's the thing that you're normally targeting with your air core rig. And so you go in with your air core rig, you target this sort of 100, 200 metre wide supergene blanket, and then you focus in and then hopefully hit the bedrock. But the problem at Gidji is that that paleochannel has come in across the top like a big bulldozer and scraped all that supergene stuff off. So you're left with only a metre or two of weathered stuff above that bedrock. And so that supergene halo goes from, say, 200 metres down to maybe less than 50 metres. So that means that your drill spacing, your air core drill spacing has got to be closer than it would be if you were drilling somewhere with an intact regolith profile. So the reason that we've done another round of infill drilling is that we're trying to focus in on that bedrock mineralisation, because we don't have that luxury of the big supergene halo that you would see in a normal profile. And having said that, our drill spacing, our air core drill spacing at Gidji is still the tightest we've got is 50 by 50. So that's still, if you think about you're looking for something that's maybe 30 metres wide, that's still pretty broad. So you basically got to get a hole into it. You've got to get a hole into that mineralisation to then see it. So we've done about, what did we do just recently? 130 holes, I think it was. And we're waiting on results from those. And then using the gold numbers, but also the multi-element data, which is really important, combined with the SAM survey, will help us hopefully focus in on those bedrock structures and give us a much better, tighter target for bedrock drilling, because we don't want to waste lots of deeper drilling. So.
For those guys out there, and then I dwell on this topic because they don't actually have an appreciation of what that 30 metres Dolerite in terms of value, right? Because they're hearing you saying, I'm going to do all this, but I'm going to find this 30 metre Dolerite, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can just enlighten a bit.
So the Paddington deposit is about 20 kilometres north of us, I think, bit more maybe, 25 kilometres north of us. And it's sort of the model for what we're looking at Gidji. And the Paddington deposit, basically you've got a Dolerite, as I said, it's like a mini version of the Golden Mile Dolerite. It's what they call a differentiated Dolerite. It's about 30 metres wide, and it sits at the contact between the Black Flag beds, which is volcanics and sediments and things, and then the Barara Shear Zone, right? And then the Dolerite sort of sits on the boundary, and that's exactly what we've got at our Blackfriars target. But the primary mineralisation at Paddington, that's like a 2 million ounce deposit that's hosted in that Dolerite. And so within that Paddington Dolerite, which is like basically vertical, 30 metres thick, about a few hundred metres long, maybe 500 or 600 metres long. There's all these quartz veins within that Dolerite and sulphides and stuff, and that hosted like 2 million ounces. So that's what we're looking for, and the footprint, as I said, it's like 30 metres wide by maybe a few hundred metres long. And that's what we're trying to snag at Gidji. So,
and I think that a lot of people get hung up on grade and length intercept, but over the years I've learned that it's about economic viability of XYZ number of ounces of gold, right?
Yeah.
So it's really kind of like not fanciful but valuable.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean we've talked a lot of Gidji because I actually, and I think people can go back to our previous coffee with Samso's. I really like where Gidji is, what potentially Gidji could bring for any company.
Yeah.
And like it or not, Miramar's market cap is actually very attractive for the retail side of things for a long punt. And I keep saying if you average down or you're in and at today's price, I mean, what is it, 3 million market cap?
Yeah, basically,
like? Yeah. 10 times is only 30 million market cap.
Yeah.
So it's the upside is great, but Gidji is one thing, but what are your other projects that you have?
Oh, just before we move on, I'll say that at Gidji we're about to start an RC drilling campaign this weekend. We announced a few weeks ago that we did a drill for equity deal with Top Drill, and that enables us to drill and then pay for part of the drilling with equity. So it's 40% of the drilling cost up to a maximum of $500,000.
Okay.
So basically that means we get to stretch our drilling budget further, and there's quite a few of these deals that have been announced recently, and Top Drill have got a number of deals with a number of different companies, and it shows a level of confidence in the project and the company by Top Drill to go, right, we're going to share the risk with you. So where we're drilling on where we start drilling this weekend is at our 8 mile target, which is right down on the southern boundary, right next to Northern Star, and there's a deposit called 8 Mile, which sits across the border. It's about 300,000 ounces. So we're hoping to find the northern extension to that. We did some IP surveys over the last sort of couple of years while people were focused on other stuff. And we reckon we know why we missed it back in 2021. We think it's been offset by faulting. And the IP surveys give us a couple of really good targets. So that's what we're going to drill. And we're going to drill some deep RC holes, sort of 400-500 metre holes. But the drill for equity agreement means that we can do that without sort of, taking a big risk. So
Top Drill seems to be doing a lot, as you said, to do a lot, but I don't see many other companies doing that.
We've talked about it with a couple of companies.
Yeah.
We actually did one with a company called Top Drive. When we did our drilling at Whale Shark 2 years ago, we did a drill for equity agreement there.
Okay.
And also we did it when we did some geophysics work at Bangemall. We did a 50-50 cash equity deal when we did our ground geophysics. So people do it. And we've done it a couple of times, as I say, but we've also, we've got R&D grants and we've got EIS refunds as well. So we've done everything we can to try and stretch our exploration dollars as far as we can. And that means that since listing, we've spent around 70% of our money has gone into the ground. It's not spent on overheads. We've got a small office in South Perth. Marion and myself are both doing technical and corporate roles. So we don't have a specific exploration manager or MD. We do a bit of everything. So that means that most of my time is actually allocated to projects. It's not a corporate overhead.
Speaking of the gold price and everything, do you see it hanging around at this range for a while?
Gold's always, in times of uncertainty, gold always goes right. And geez, what's going on in the world at the moment, you just got to see the gold price going and going and going. So the producers are making lots of money. The developers are starting to get a bit of money, but it still hasn't flowed down to gold explorers yet. And like you said, Gidji, you're 15 k's out of Kalgoorlie, surrounded by deposits and processing plants. It's a real no-brainer. The whole reason that Gidji is still there is because of the Paleochannel. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? It makes it a bit difficult, but that's where the opportunity is because it's so close to Kalgoorlie and hasn't been explored. And don't forget that we've drilled 900 air core holes and we've found a lot of supergene gold. We haven't put a number around it. We put a number around Marylebone a few years ago and that was about 100,000 ounces just by itself. So there's a lot of supergene gold there. We want to find the bedrock source of that and then maybe we get to mine the supergene stuff on the way down. But there's a lot of gold there and it's got to be coming from somewhere. It's got to be coming from somewhere and that's what we're focused on finding. So.
At Samso recently, we've put out what our catchphrase is, seeking the research. So do you think, the part of the Miramar story that the market seems to have overlooked or misunderstood, do you think is really comes down to that Gidji uncertainty because of the Paleochannel?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, but there's always something with a project, right? There's always some reason that the discovery hasn't been made before, and that's why, in Gidji's case, it's because of the transported cover and the Paleochannel, right? On other projects, it might be because, the geology was misunderstood or the commodity price wasn't right or you couldn't get access to the ground. There's always something. I always go on about the non-technical aspects that stop you from making a discovery. It might be the wrong gold price or you haven't got money or you got the wrong manager or whatever. There's always something. It's trying to see through the sort of non-important things to the important things. And if the underlying project, if the underlying concept, the exploration concept is sound, then you've got to try and ignore that stuff a bit and keep focused. And so, we've had a lot of pressure over the last couple of years to do other stuff, to go chasing lithium in Quebec or go chasing rare earths or whatever. And we've sort of resisted that because we think that our gold projects are really good and that our other sort of high risk projects are really good as well. And we're still developing those concepts until we get to the point where we go, nah, we've disproved that now. then we'll keep going, So,
I think in some ways, the way I view where we are, I mean, first 2 years after COVID, if you didn't have lithium in your portfolio, nobody knows you.
mm-hmm.
And then that went wayside. And then now is that if you didn't have gold, and you're down the way. So, and then now we've seen a lot of M&As in the gold sector.
Yep.
And I mean, it's almost safe to say that all the good stuff has found its place, whether they've merged or not merged. Now we're seeing the second tier stuff where, I use this word, it used to be uneconomical because of the high price of gold. They're becoming to be economical, which I think is fraught with danger.
Yeah, we saw that back in 2010, 2011 as well. And again, back then we were only talking about a $1,500 gold price, but we saw a lot of projects get developed and start operating that probably shouldn't have. And there was a few around in the Murchison, especially that happened. And what they say, the rising tide lifts all boats, but the costs go up too.
Yes,
So the gold price goes up and the costs go up.
Correct.
So it's all about margin, as it always is. But, you'll see that. You'll see these projects that were uneconomic. And I guess, some projects will be economic, some projects won't be.
Yeah.
But they'll be able to be promoted as being economic.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting because, like I say, 2010, 2011, it was just crazy. It was crazy. Gold was absolutely crazy, but it was only 1,500, and now we're talking 5,500. So,
I remember having similar conversation with Rick Ruin, and he said, no, if it went to 3,000. I mean, he's talking US dollars. 3,000 or more, or 5,000. I think he meant we were talking about that. He said, something really bad has happened in our world to get there. Right?
There's lots bad happening now.
Yeah. So let's hope it doesn't materialise that way. But anti-cyclical thinking, we were going to talk about your other projects.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned Bangemall, something that you want to sort of talk about more.
Yep.
Nickel, copper, PGE, but I always think as an exploration geologist, yes, you're chasing that type, but could it be that or a hybrid of that, like the WA1 story where they went looking for ICG?
So Bangemall's an interesting one. It's taking a bit of convincing and a bit of understanding. We're looking for a nickel copper PGE deposit or deposits, and it's a new idea, but it's something that both the GL Survey of WA and Geoscience Australia and CSIRO have said there should be this type of deposit there. And what we talk about is Norilsk. The Norilsk Talnak deposits in Siberia are the biggest nickel copper PGE deposits in the world. And they're one of the most valuable mineral deposits in the world of any type, okay? And it's a special type of deposit. It's a nickel copper PGE deposit that's formed by mafic sills, dolerites and gabbros intruding into a sedimentary basin, okay? So it's different to Nova, it's different to Nebo Babel, it's different to Savannah, those sort of things. They're all part of the same family, but it's a specific model. And that's what we've got at Bangemall. So you've got this Bangemall Basin, which is now subdivided into the Edmund and Collier Basin. And you've got these dolerite sills. There's a particular unit called the Calcathara dolerite, and it intrudes into the basin. And the idea is that the Calcathara dolerite, which is the same age as Nebo and Babel in the West Musgraves, is part of this Warrakurna large igneous province. So that dolerite hosts nickel, copper and PGEs, okay? It intrudes into this sedimentary basin, and there's units within the sedimentary basin that have got sulphur. So some of the units have got pyrite, so there's sulphur there as sulphides, but more similar to Norilsk in Siberia, there's units there that have got evaporites, so you've got sulphate, so stromatolites and things. And the idea is that the sills intrude into these units, they pick up the sulphur, they grab the sulphur either from the pyrite or from sulphates, and you get to a point where the dolerite becomes saturated. So it's like putting sugar in a cup of tea, and you put spoon in and it dissolves, and you just put another spoon in and it dissolves, and you put another spoon in and it dissolves, and you keep doing that until it gets so saturated the sugar can't dissolve anymore. And then what happens is the nickel and the sulfur combines and drops out. Okay, so the first step was to prove that that had happened, because there's lots of these big basins with these sills around the world, but not all of them are what they call fertile. So the first thing was we went out there, we did all this rock chipping, and we found sulfides, and we thought, okay, this is good. But when we started doing multi-element geochemistry, there was two things that we proved. One, that the sills were differentiated. That means that there's minerals separating out as the sills deposit. But the other thing is that the sulfides were forming, and we found chalcopyrite and pentlandite, right? So then we did a big EM survey, and we come up with some EM targets, and we drilled those EM targets, and we drilled 9 RC holes. That was co-funded by the WA government, and 7 of those holes hit differentiated sills, which was the first tick in the box, with mafic cumulate rocks, which is the same as Norilsk, and we got chalcopyrite and pentlandite disseminated through those holes in 7 of the 9 holes. So we proved that this is a fertile environment for the formation of a Norilsk deposit, okay, or a Norilsk style deposit. Now, a bit like Gidji, what we're talking about, the size and scale of these things. So bear in mind that the Norilsk talnarite deposits host trillions of dollars worth of nickel, copper, PGEs. The footprint of these things is quite small. They form in what they call chonoliths, and a chonolith is sort of like a flattened tube, almost like a tube of toothpaste, sort of horizontally sitting in the basin. But these things can only be a few hundred metres long and 100 or 200 metres thick. So bear in mind that our tenement package is about 50 kilometres by 20 kilometres. You're looking for something that's a couple of hundred metres long. Luckily, the massive sulfides that we're looking for are really conductive, really conductive, because it's just massive sulfide, pentlandite, chalcopyrite, and PGEs too. PGEs are really important because they make these things really super profitable if you find one. So we did an EM survey at Mount Vernon. That was 400 metre line spacing, and we found and proved the concept that there is mineralisation there. And then we picked up a whole area to the northeast, and in the latest round of the EIS funding, we got EIS funding for a big detailed EM survey over that new ground, and we got the maximum you could get. We got $250,000, which means we'll spend about $500,000 and we'll get 250 grand back. And that line spacing, by getting that EIS funding, it meant we were able to cut our line spacing of the flight lines from 400 metres down to 200, which means that if we're looking for one of these couple of 100 metre long chonoliths of massive sulfides, then we've got a much better chance of hitting it with 200 metre lines than with 400 metre lines, right? So that's the next step, and that EM survey is going to kick off in mid-July. It'll take about 3 or 4 weeks to get that done. We're looking for some nice, EM conductors that we can combine with the survey we've already got. And then the next step after that will be getting out on the ground, seeing if we can actually see mineralisation, and then follow up with ground EM as well. We've signed up for a research project with the CSIRO. They're doing a specific project on mafic-hosted nickel copper PGE deposits, and we've signed up to that, and they're quite encouraged with the data that we're getting out of the Bangemall. So it's quite exciting because this is the first time anyone has specifically looked for Norilsk style mineralisation in WA, and we think that we're on the track. Everything we're seeing is ticking the boxes. Now we've got to find the sweet spot, find the massive sulfide. And if we do, it could be pretty spectacular for the company.
Is this new thinking or for this area, or is this? It's always not new thinking.
It's new. Yes and no. So I've actually been interested in the area since the mid-90s, from my time with Western Mining. But a whole heap of things needed to happen over the last sort of 20 years. one of the key things is that no one really knew about Norilsk until the fall of Soviet Union. So we're talking back in the 90s. No one really knew about Norilsk. So it took time for people to understand about Norilsk. But then also there were other discoveries that were made. So Voisey Bay was discovered in 95. Nebo Babel was discovered in 2000. Nova was discovered in 2012. Julimar even, that's sort of part of the story as well. So there was a new discoveries and new understanding as to what these deposits look like, but also the Bangemall Basin or the Capricorn origin where we're working, it was quite unknown, and it was a combination of GSWA and Geoscience Australia and CSIRO collecting data sets. They started off with geochemistry in the mid-late 90s, and that's where I started looking at it. There was some seismic lines that were done in 2010. There was some age dating done in 2004, 2005, which linked it to Nebo Babel. There was a big EM survey done in 2013, which highlighted conductors. And then in 2016, Geoscience Australia put together this nickel atlas for the whole of Australia, and they highlighted some areas that should be prospective, and the Bangemall area is one of those areas. So that without those sort of bits of pre-competitive data, so government data, you couldn't sort of develop that model. You needed, prior to some of the work that GeoSurvey did in 2004, 2005, there was actually there's two different Dolerites up there, and they're different ages and different prospectivity, but they were all mapped as one. So if you went and sampled that one, then you might get the wrong idea, but if you went and sampled that one, then that would start to look interesting. So there's things like that, So it's all about timing sometimes. You needed that data to actually work out what was going on. So we're really excited about it. We're actually talking to a few different companies about the project, big companies. So the idea is always to prove the concept and then potentially get a big brother to help us develop it. But, if we're really lucky, we hit some massive sulphide like Sirius did, and, we've defined a new mineral province. So,
in some weird way, I see Miramar as a company that is ideal for investors to look at for that next growth. My long-term view is that the mineral resource industry is going to progress positively in the next, decade in some ways. But, a company like Miramar's, and I was an early investor in your stock, and we've seen that valuation drop. But in some ways, you almost need to do that because the stuff that you needed to do is very boring, and the market's never going to like it. And now you got to a point where, hey, it's pretty cheap to enter now because, you got these upsides from all that work you've done. It's kind of like bad and good in a way.
Yeah, so like we were talking about, what's happened with gold. So, when we listed in 2020, we focused on gold, 2021, 2022, we did a lot of work at Gidji. And the strategy of the company was that we had these bread and butter Eastern Goldfields projects, which were going to be the stuff we're talking about all the time. But the high risk, high reward company maker stuff, like Whale Shark and Bangemall, was supposed to be sort of stuff we did in the background, ticking along, like doing the boring stuff, the stuff that's a bit harder for the market to understand. But because the interest in gold went away, we almost got forced into talking more about Whale Shark when maybe the market wasn't quite ready for it, and we weren't quite ready for it. And so we've progressed those things. Like, we found copper mineralisation at Whale Shark, and we can talk a bit more about that in a minute. But, we've progressed that. We haven't killed Whale Shark. Whale Shark's actually looking better than it was 2 years ago. And Bangemall, as we just talked about, we've progressed that from this sort of, arm wavy idea to we've now proved that we've got the right rocks, we've got mineralisation, we've got to find the massive sulphide. So, and that stuff is really interesting from a geologist, but it's hard to explain it to the market.
Yeah, the market's never going to like it.
Because the market just wants a massive sulphide hit.
That's right.
That's great. We do too.
Yeah. That's kind of the offset, right?
Yeah.
You can't have that if you don't have that boring stuff that
Yep.
plots along. And some companies walk into a project where all that boring stuff was done by a suite of 5 companies
Yep.
historically, and
Yep.
and then they picked it up. But
Yep.
Going back to your Gidji conversation about the 30-meter Dolerite, I remember talking to someone who was working at Kundana, I believe.
Yep.
He said that there was nothing, once you go out of that unit, there was just nothing there.
And the Raleigh deposit is like 1 million ounces at an ounce per tonne.
Yeah.
And it's just a quartz vein, a couple of metres wide. It's a bit like Andy Well, right?
Yeah.
Andy Well was like a mini version of Raleigh. But yeah, there's nothing outside it.
Yeah.
There's nothing outside that couple of metre wide quartz vein.
So it's kind of like either you're lucky, and we always say use that word lucky in a way, because you could go either way, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a sort of a bit of a phrase that people say, it takes skill as a geologist to get yourself into the right area.
Yeah.
But then how big it is when you find it is pure luck.
Yeah. That's right.
So the hard part is actually trying to get yourself into the right area, and then if you're really lucky, you find a monster.
Correct.
If you're unlucky, you find a little squibby thing, and then that's it.
I think, again, that's another conversation about how everyone thinks a mine would rape and pillage environment, but if you look at the size of the footprint, it's minuscule compared to a wheat farmer.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Or a solar farm.
Oh, a solar farm. Let's not get into that one.
Yeah.
So going forward, next 12 months, 6 months, 12 months, how do you see the news flow coming out from Miramar? Obviously, from my point of view, I think Miramar's a fantastic entry. Now, for me to start averaging down, like it or not, but what's the news?
Well, I think our market cap at 3 million really is a bit ridiculous. Gidji by itself is worth more than that, right? And it's almost like, it seems like the more projects you have, you get discounted for each project, so you end up at the same place. And for me, that's doesn't make sense, but I'm pretty confident with our projects. Gidji's fantastic opportunity in a great location. You don't need to find anything really big there. You can find something sort of modest and monetize it really quickly. So that's the whole strategy. And in the background, we're working on the big company maker. Like we haven't talked about whale shark, but we think there's a ICG opportunity there, and we've just done some new modelling that again sort of adds to the whole story. Bangemall, we're looking for a big nickel copper PGE deposit, and then if we find that, then there's a whole nother story there about what we do about that, So, but the moment the focus is on Gidji, we said we've done the air core, we're waiting on those results. The SAM survey, we'll do the RC drilling, depending on what we hit at 8 Mile, that might keep going. The EM survey commencing at Bangemall in mid-July, that will take 3 or 4 weeks, and then there's a bit of processing and stuff to work out what that data is showing us, and then hopefully we get back on the ground before it gets too hot up there. So through to sort of October, November, I think we're going to be pretty busy between those 2 projects. We've also got a sampling trip planned for our Chain Pool project, which is our little copper, lead, zinc thing up in the Gascoyne as well. Again, that's different again. The thing about our projects is they're all different from each other. You got a typical gold project at Gidji, you've got ICG opportunity at Whale Shark, and the real style nickel copper PGE at Bangemall, and a SEDEX style thing at Chain Pool, which is like the deposits in Queensland, like Lady Loretta and things like that. So, they're all sort of different deposit styles. So, we're quite busy. As I said, we don't have a lot of overheads. Marion and myself do a bit of everything. We've got a small team. We try and put every dollar we can in the ground, and because our strategy is about trying to make a discovery. We want to make a discovery and create value. We're not about buying and selling projects like a real estate broker. We don't want to chop and change all over the place. We want to get out and do good work, and obviously know when to stop as well. Know when that's not meeting the milestones. But at the moment, like I said before, on all our projects, every time we test something, we're like ticking the box, and we'll keep going forward until we stop ticking boxes. So
I think with the state of the gold price, and I agree, it's going to hang around for a little while.
oh yeah,
Gidji is going to be one of the best opportunities. I mean, we're not saying it's all whether you get lucky, right? But I think it's the upside there is immense because, like you said, it's so close to everything.
yeah, it's got fantastic geology. We're in the Barara Shear Zone, which hosts Paddington and Barara and Golden Ridge and things like that. It's got a really good structure. We're starting to understand that structure a lot better. There's heaps of gold there. Supergene gold, we're trying to find the bedrock source of that, but that gold's come from somewhere. And as I said, and commercially it's in a great location, so it's easy to get to. So, so we're pretty excited about that.
All right. I can hear in the background our mate over there is making louder and louder noise, so we'll try and finish it off. Look, any last words, Allan? The sell your soul opportunity.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say, I'm a big shareholder in the company, so it's frustrating for me to see the share price and market cap where it is. It's a function of the market. It's a function of the short-termism of lots of investors at the moment and wanting to jump from commodity to commodity. We're committed to the company. We're committed to the projects. As I say, we try and spend as much money we can on the ground testing ideas. We don't have big overheads. So I just want shareholders to know that we're focused on making discovery for our shareholders.
Fantastic. Look, Allan, always pleasure to have a chat with you. I think this kind of educating of what your projects really are is what makes a difference, I think. So till next time, thank you, and good luck, and I hope I'll pick up some more shares.
All right, thanks.
All right.